The air inside Commander Daniel Harris's command center was stifling. Gone. Another fleet, the tech officer muttered, his voice barely concealing panic. Harris stood over the holographic display, jaw clenched as another red dot blinked out, leaving only empty space. That's 3 fleets this week, the commander said, his voice a low rumble. No debris. No survivors. They just vanish. Across the room, Dr. Elena Carter, the sharp-eyed scientist overseeing intelligence, snapped her head up. They don't just vanish, she said. This isn't magic. It's something we're missing. Harris met her gaze, his steel-gray eyes narrowing. And we'll find out what that is. But until then, we're the only line of defense left. The tension in the room was palpable. Earth's last fleet stood alone, awaiting orders at the brink of destruction. As each fleet disappeared without a trace, the alien threat felt closer, more inevitable. The invaders, the Kaith, were known for their superior technology, but no one had expected this, a silent, invisible assault that left humanity helpless. Lieutenant Marcus Walker, standing near the communications console, spoke up. Commander, I still think we should deploy the drones. It's the only thing we haven't tried yet. We're outgunned, but maybe our tech can match theirs. Harris frowned. Every fleet with the most advanced tech is gone, Walker. They relied on those drones, on complex systems. It's what's killing us. Dr. Carter crossed her arms. Commander's right. Every signal, every piece of tech we throw at them just shuts down. We've been thinking in the wrong direction. The Kaith aren't fighting us, they're making us fight ourselves. Then what do we do? Marcus's frustration bubbled over. Sit here and wait for them to come for us? No, Harris said quietly. We go dark. A stunned silence fell over the room. Harris's words hung heavy in the air. The idea of turning off their tech, the very tools that had kept humanity alive against a superior force, seemed insane. Yet, there was a certain logic to it, a simplicity that cut through the fear. You can't be serious, Marcus whispered, eyes wide. We'd be blind out there. Elena's face lit with sudden realization. Not blind. Invisible. Harris turned to her, the gears already turning in his mind. Explain. She stepped forward, pointing to the blank spots on the holographic map where the fleets had disappeared. The Kaith rely on complex signals, communications, scanners, everything. They hijack our systems the moment they pick us up. If we turn off everything, go manual, we take away their advantage. They're expecting us to fight like them, Harris said, his voice steady but growing in intensity. But we're not them. We use what we have. We use human instinct. Marcus hesitated, glancing between them. So, we don't fire first? Harris smiled grimly. We don't fire at all, not until we know where they are. We'll set a trap. They can't fight what they can't see. A low murmur rippled through the room as the officers processed this new approach. It was risky, facing the most advanced alien race in the galaxy using tactics as old as human conflict itself, but in the silence that followed, the fear began to morph into resolve. Prepare the fleet, Harris ordered. Manual control. Low emissions. We leave nothing for them to track. As Marcus nodded and hurried to relay the orders, Harris turned to Elena. You're sure about this? As sure as I can be without getting us all killed, she replied, her expression softening for the first time. But it's better than watching another fleet vanish without a fight. Harris gave a short nod. Then we fight smart. The countdown to their final stand had begun, and Earth's last hope now rested not on advanced technology, but on something much simpler, the power of human adaptability. The command center hummed softly, the last remnants of automated systems powering down. Dim red lights bathed the room as Commander Harris watched the screens flicker to black. In the sudden quiet, every breath and rustle felt louder, more real. No more scanners. No more digital feeds. Just the sound of human presence, as if technology itself had been holding its breath. We're dark, Lieutenant Marcus Walker said, his voice barely above a whisper. The unease was palpable. The fleet now floated, invisible in the void of space, no signals, no energy spikes. Completely manual, completely vulnerable. Or so it felt. Good, Harris said, keeping his voice steady. We wait. Dr. Elena Carter sat cross-legged at her station, poring over a tablet, the one concession to technology they had left. Her sharp features were illuminated by its faint glow as she calculated trajectories and estimated where the Tkaith might strike next. The trick now, she murmured, not looking up, is figuring out exactly where they'll come from before we're too late. Marcus shifted uneasily at the helm, his hands fidgeting with the manual controls. I don't like this, he muttered. Sitting here, waiting in the dark while they're out there, hunting us. Harris shot him a look, firm but not unkind. None of us like it, Walker. But we've tried fighting their way, and it's gotten us nothing but dead fleets. We're doing this differently now. Marcus bit his lip, keeping his eyes forward, the weight of responsibility hanging heavily on his shoulders. He'd lost friends in those vanished fleets, people who had trusted technology to save them. Now, with everything stripped away, all he had left was his gut, and that terrified him. Elena's voice cut through the tension. I've isolated an anomaly. It's faint, barely detectable without scanners, but there's an energy ripple on the outer edges of the system. Could be a cloaked Tkaith ship. Harris moved to her side, peering over her shoulder at the tablet. How long until they reach us? At their current speed, a few hours. But they'll have no idea we're here, not unless we give ourselves away. Marcus exhaled sharply. So we're just sitting ducks? Harris turned, meeting Marcus's eyes directly. No. We're the ones laying the trap. There was a pause, a subtle shift in the room as Harris's confidence settled over the crew. It wasn't blind optimism, it was experience. He had faced overwhelming odds before, different enemies, different battles, but the same core strategy remained: adapt, survive, outthink. The minutes ticked by, stretching into an agonizing silence. Harris kept his crew focused, issuing quiet, precise orders. Small movements. Minimal power. The key was patience, something that Tkaith had exploited but had never expected humans to wield so effectively. Elena continued to track the anomaly, every few moments adjusting their trajectory by the smallest fractions. They're moving faster now, she said, her voice low. Their cloaking field is distorting slightly. That could mean they're scanning. Harris nodded, calm despite the rising tension. Hold position. Let them think we're not here. Marcus's hands clenched around the controls, knuckles white. How long until we strike? When they're close enough to see the whites of their eyes, Harris replied deadpan. It drew a faint, nervous chuckle from the crew, but the underlying tension remained. The silence stretched on, tightening with every passing second. Elena's screen flashed suddenly, the anomaly spiking in intensity. They're almost on top of us. Harris leaned forward, the edges of his mouth tightening. Everyone, hold steady. Manual targeting only. No energy spikes. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest, his fingers twitching toward the manual fire controls. It felt wrong, every fiber of his being screamed for action, for retaliation, but Harris's voice anchored him, pulling him back from the edge. Wait, Harris said softly. Wait for it. The Tkaith's ship appeared, a dark silhouette against the stars, moving with eerie grace, unaware of the humans watching from the shadows. Harris's eyes sharpened. Now. Marcus's hands flew across the controls, and with a flick of his wrist, the fleet's cannons roared to life, silent, unseen, firing manually aimed rounds straight into the heart of the alien vessel. The ship buckled under the unexpected barrage, its shields flickering in confusion. It hadn't anticipated an attack so primitive, so crude, yet devastatingly accurate. The Tkaith's ship staggered, attempting to cloak, but it was too late. The damage was done. Harris wasted no time. Fire again. Another volley struck, this time tearing through the alien vessel, breaching its hull. The Tkaith's ship began to implode in on itself, a sickeningly silent collapse in the vacuum of space. It was over in moments. Marcus sat back, breathless, sweat beading on his forehead. "We got them," he whispered, barely able to believe it. Harris remained stone-faced, his eyes locked on the wreckage. "That was just the first. There will be more." Elena glanced at the remnants of the Kaith vessel, her voice soft but resolute. "We've shown them we can fight back. But this is only the beginning." Harris turned to his crew, the hard lines of his face softening slightly. "We've survived today. But we're not out of the woods yet. Stay sharp, and remember, this war isn't about who has the better tech. It's about who adapts faster." As the stars around them shimmered, silent witnesses to the battle, Harris knew this fight would demand every last ounce of human ingenuity and grit. And that Kaith, for all their advancements, were about to learn just how dangerous humanity could be when pushed to the brink. The distant wreckage of the Kaith's ships slowly drifted out of sight, swallowed by the vastness of space. But for Commander Harris, the quiet victory offered little solace. The Kaith wouldn't let one defeat go unanswered. "How long before they send more?" Marcus asked, his hands still trembling from the intensity of the battle. His voice was low, almost as if speaking too loudly might summon the enemy. "Not long," Harris replied. "They'll know we're here now. They'll come back smarter, stronger." Dr. Elena Carter, still glued to her tablet, looked up. "They'll analyze what we did. Their response will be faster and more coordinated." Marcus clenched his jaw. "So we hit them once and they learn." "Great." Harris paced the length of the command center, deep in thought. His mind ran through a dozen scenarios, each more grim than the last. But one fact remained clear: they had to stay ahead of the Kaith's learning curve. "We don't have to outfight them," he said, more to himself than to his crew. "We just need to outthink them." Elena's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. "Commander, if we could predict their response." "That's exactly what we need," Harris said, stopping in his tracks. "We set a trap. Not just one, they'll expect a single strike. We make it so they're walking into layers of traps." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that without any tech? Manual control can only take us so far." Harris turned toward him, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Manual doesn't mean mindless. We have the element of unpredictability. They assume we'll rely on systems, algorithms, things they can manipulate. But if we make this fight about instinct, they won't know how to counter us. They don't understand human chaos," Elena said, her own expression shifting into a look of grim determination. "But we do." Harris nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll use the debris field from their destroyed ship. Hide our signatures behind it and lay our traps. We bait them into thinking we're scattered and vulnerable." Marcus hesitated. "That could work, but we're going to need perfect timing. One mistake, and we're the ones walking into their crosshairs. That's why we use manual positioning," Elena said. "We'll split the fleet, stagger the signals. Make them think we're everywhere and nowhere." Harris took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on his shoulders. "This is our only shot. If we don't throw them off balance now, they'll overwhelm us before we get another chance." Marcus swallowed hard but nodded. "All right. We do this." "Get to work," Harris ordered. "Start maneuvering the ships into position. Elena, I want you to oversee the decoys. Make it convincing." As the crew snapped into action, the tension in the command center grew palpable. Every movement, every order carried a heightened sense of urgency. There was no room for error. Each ship in the fleet had to be positioned with meticulous precision, creating the illusion of chaos where there was none. Hours passed, the silence of space pressing in on them as they worked. Outside, the debris from the destroyed Kaith's ship floated like a graveyard of metal and ruin. Harris stood at the viewing window, watching as their ships vanished into the twisted wreckage, their energy signatures masked behind the debris. "We're in position," Elena reported, her voice tight with focus. "All ships are set, decoy signals online." Marcus stared at the tactical display, a patchwork of red and green blips representing the scattered remnants of their fleet. "It's a mess out there." "Good," Harris said, his voice calm despite the mounting tension. That's exactly what we want. The moments that followed stretched on in eerie stillness, the crew waiting in breathless anticipation. Then, a soft ping echoed through the command center. Elena's fingers flew across her console. I've got movement. Multiple Kate ships incoming, fast. Harris's heart quickened. How many? At least 4. Elena replied, her voice steady but tense. They're not wasting any time. Hold positions, Harris commanded, his eyes fixed on the screen. Let them come to us. The Kate's ships moved with precision, cutting through the debris field with unnerving grace. But just as Harris had anticipated, they didn't fire. Instead, they scanned, searching for a trace of human signatures. The decoys had done their job. Confusion rippled through the Kate formation, their movements erratic, unsure. They're splitting up, Elena said, her voice low. They think we're spread out. Wait for it, Harris murmured, watching as the Kate's ships fractured into smaller search teams, each drifting further into the trap. His breath came shallow, his pulse pounding in his ears. They had one chance to strike, and it had to be perfect. No, Harris ordered. In an instant, the fleet's hidden ships sprang to life, their manual thrusters propelling them into ambush positions. The Kate had no time to react. Human cannons fired with deadly accuracy, striking the alien vessels from multiple angles. The Kate's ships buckled under the sudden assault, their shields flaring, unable to withstand the concentrated fire. Direct hit on 2 ships, Marcus reported, adrenaline surging in his voice. They're losing formation. Harris's eyes remained cold and focused. Keep pressing. Don't let them regroup. The Kate's ships attempted to retaliate, but the confusion of the battlefield, combined with the humans' unpredictable tactics, kept them on the defensive. One by one, the alien ships faltered, their advanced systems failing to compensate for the sheer unpredictability of human strategy. As the last Kate's ship exploded in a flash of light, the command center erupted in a wave of relief. Marcus exhaled a long breath, sinking back into his chair. We did it! Again. But Harris didn't share in the momentary celebration. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, where the debris of both human and alien ships floated, a testament to the battle's cost. They'll come again, he said quietly, almost to himself. And they'll be ready for this next time. Elena stepped beside him, her voice soft. Then we'll find another way. We always do. Harris turned to her, his expression unreadable. Let's hope we have enough time to figure it out. The aftershock of the last Kate's skirmish left a silence in its wake, too quiet for comfort. Commander Harris stood at the edge of the command center, his eyes scanning the black expanse of space through the observation window. It was peaceful, deceptive. But he knew better. The Kate would return, and they wouldn't be tricked by the same tactic again. Status report, Harris commanded, his voice steely. There was a sharpness to his tone that hadn't been there before, a sign of the relentless pressure building behind his calm facade. We've taken damage on 2 frigates, but our main fleet is intact, Elena replied, tapping her console. Her fingers moved with precision, but her eyes betrayed a weariness creeping into the edges of her resolve. We've replenished our decoy systems, but the Kate will adapt. They always do. They're not just adapting. Marcus cut in, frustration rippling through his voice. They're learning us. They're treating us like an equation, and every time we solve for X, they're already calculating Y. Harris crossed his arms, his gaze unfaltering. Then we give them something they can't calculate. Elena looked up, curious. What do you have in mind? Harris glanced at Marcus, a glimmer of something dangerous in his eyes. A desperation move. We take the fight to them. The command center went silent. Even the low hum of the ship's system seemed to fade as Harris's words hung in the air. Marcus shook his head slowly. You're talking about attacking a Kate stronghold? That's a death sentence. Not if we use their overconfidence against them, Harris countered, his voice firm. They've studied us enough to expect a defensive strategy. They'll be planning a coordinated assault, But they won't anticipate an outright offensive from a smaller force like ours. Elena bit her lip, running the scenario through her mind. It's high risk. But it could work. The Tkaith operate on probabilities. They don't understand an emotional leap, a calculated gamble. It's not in their programming. Marcus stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. Even if we catch them off guard, we'll be facing overwhelming odds. We might not survive this. Harris met his gaze, unflinching. We don't have to survive. We just need to make sure they don't. The room filled with the heavy weight of their decision. This was it, the final gambit. They could either continue playing defense and wait for the inevitable defeat, or they could strike now and gamble everything on one final move. Harris looked to his crew, knowing he couldn't make the choice alone. Elena was the first to speak. I'm in. We've come this far. We can't just sit back and wait for them to finish us. Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. This is insane. But it's the best shot we've got. I'll start preparing the fleet. Harris nodded, grateful for their resolve. He turned back toward the viewport, watching as distant stars twinkled in the darkness. They had chosen their path, and there was no turning back. The fleet moved in silence, weaving through asteroid fields and space debris, hiding their movements from Tkaith sensors. Elena had calculated a precise route to their target, a Tkaith command relay station deep within enemy territory. If they could destroy it, they'd cripple the Tkaith's ability to coordinate their forces across the sector. Approaching the relay, Marcus reported, his voice tense but steady. They haven't detected us yet. They will, Harris said, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. But by the time they do, it'll be too late. The relay station came into view, a massive structure bristling with weaponry and sensor arrays. It pulsed with the cold, mechanical precision that defined the Tkaith. Harris felt a flicker of doubt in the pit of his stomach, but he buried it deep. There was no room for hesitation now. Elena, initiate the decoy sequence. Marcus, prepare the strike teams. Elena's hands moved swiftly across her console. Decoys deployed. Masking our approach. For a moment, it seemed to work. The Tkaith station didn't react, its systems undisturbed by the approaching human fleet. But then, just as Harris feared, the enemy adapted. Red lights flashed across the tactical display as Tkaith drones swarmed from the station, their cold, calculating minds locking onto the human ships. They're onto us, Marcus said, his voice tight. Hold position, Harris ordered. Let the decoys draw them in. The drones swarmed the decoy signals, firing in precise formations. Harris watched as the decoys flickered and died, but the real fleet remained hidden in the shadow of a nearby asteroid cluster. The Tkaith were methodical, efficient, but they hadn't accounted for human unpredictability. Now! Harris barked. All ships engage! The human fleet surged from the asteroid belt, cannons blazing. The first wave of Tkaith drones disintegrated under the concentrated fire, but more were coming. Harris knew they couldn't hold them off for long. Target the relay station! Harris shouted, his heart pounding. Full power to weapons! The human ships fired in unison, their combined energy slamming into the relay station's shields. The Tkaith defenses flared, but the relentless barrage from the human fleet began to crack the shield's integrity. Shields are failing! Elena called out, her voice edged with excitement. One more hit! But before they could fire again, the Tkaith drones retaliated, overwhelming the human ships with brutal efficiency. The command center shook as explosions rocked their vessel. We're taking heavy damage! Marcus shouted. Shields are down! Harris gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. Stay on target! Fire everything we've got! The next volley of human fire slammed into the relay station, and this time, the shield shattered. The station erupted in a cascade of fire and debris, the explosions sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Tkaith drones faltered, their coordination suddenly lost without the relay's command. Harris watched in grim satisfaction as their formation broke apart. We did it! Elena whispered, awe in her voice. But Harris couldn't celebrate yet. The fleet had taken heavy losses, and the Caith drones were still out there, disorganized but dangerous. Pull back, Harris ordered. We've done enough. As the human fleet retreated into the asteroid field, Harris felt the weight of their victory settle over him. They had struck a blow against the Caith, a decisive one, but at a terrible cost. There would be more battles to come, but for the first time in a long while, Harris felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in weeks: hope.